everybody, and welcome. It's Feb 14, 2019. Happy Valentine's Day, and we're starting right away with World of Info. Hello back again. This is World of Info with Dr. Amr Mabrouk, Professor of Plastic Surgery at Ain Shams University, Bda Mohammed at the controls. I'm Nagla Naguib, and we'll be with you until 5 o'clock, so stay with us. Hello everybody and welcome, and today we have our special guest, His Excellency Ambassador Arvydas Daunoravicius, Ambassador of Lithuania in Egypt, and we have Dr. Amr Mabrouk. Hello and welcome.
Well, it's a great pleasure to have with us for the second time our dear Ambassador of Lithuania in Egypt, Mr. Arvydas Daunoravicius. And of course, it's the second time is always going to be even better than the first time, because now it's almost a year. You have been serving here for some time, and he has been around in Egypt and Cairo, and he's also the ambassador at large, a non-permanent representative of his country in Emirates, Saudi Arabia, Jordan, Lebanon, Kuwait, Qatar, and Syria. Although yet Syria he didn't yet present his credentials, also as for Kuwait and Qatar. But a very busy embassy in Cairo, observing the Lithuanian-Egyptian relations, a relation that, strange enough, has been there for almost 400 years, as we are going to discuss with His Excellency about that. He has a degree and a master's degree in physics, and he worked in the Academy of Science in Lithuania, but he joined the Foreign Service, served in Chicago, in Belgium, in Netherlands, and he's here in Egypt. Let's talk Lithuanian. Let's talk about Lithuania, a country that, with its capital, almost lie in the exact center of Europe. So really the exact geographical center of Europe has definitely affected the history of Lithuania. Sir, thank you very much for coming.
Thank you very much for inviting me. It's so good to be back here, and hello to everyone. Yes, you mentioned that a number of the countries I'm accredited to, and I'm very proud to be the ambassador of Lithuania here in Egypt, and also the other countries we are covering from here. And of course, I have no doubts that our diplomatic representation in this region will expand, and sooner or later we have even more embassies, and we probably from Cairo will start looking to another direction than we do now.
Inshallah, yes, of course. Inshallah.
You mentioned, yes, about the center of Europe. Yes, geographical center of Europe, which was, I stress, calculated not by us.
Yes, by the French. Yes, French. And I like that very much.
Lies about 30 kilometers from the capital Vilnius, so it's a very nice park, which it's called Park of Europe. There, with a very nice sculptures, monuments. It's really a beautiful place to visit, and this is technically geographical center of Europe. Now it sounds funny, and now it sounds very nice, but probably if you go back to the history, 1,000 or several thousand years ago, that was probably a crossroad of many roads from east to west, from north to south. And when you are in the center of this crossing, you normally should deal with everyone who is.
You're definitely the victim of geography, right? Yes, I mean, for a country, for example, like Finland, once we had His Excellency the Ambassador of Finland maybe 10 years back, and Finland is definitely a gift of geography, because a country that is remote and people know how to live in it, and people are able to defend it. Were able to defend their country from invaders from all over the world, from the biggest forces. The German army and the Russian army, or the Soviet army, couldn't penetrate Finland because of the geography, right?
And the character of
the
Finnish
people,
which I respect very much.
Of course, we do respect the Finnish people, and we do admire them, of course. But looking in Lithuania, definitely the country has been the victim of geography. The center, as you have just mentioned, and definitely the crossroads, and the people are always wanting a piece of the cake, and this cake is, of course, Lithuania, right?
That's right. When we're talking about the Middle Ages or even earlier, today it's a plus.
Yes.
Today it's a big benefit, because you could be in the center of all roads, transporting goods, roads where the knowledge goes back and forth, when you could be the logistic center, which we are having the very, very nice ice-free port on the Baltic Sea. It's a north ice-free port in the Baltic Sea.
Navigable,
Yes,
yes.
that's right. And there are big plans even to expand this port, to build another one, which is outside, as we call outside port. Now we have an inside port. So it's big plans. Already now we managed to have like 40 plus million cargo per year, which is really very good result. And we have very good plans even for the future. So we're just trying to, what was 1,000 years ago, it was the minus. Now we're trying to turn into the plus, into the benefit of the country.
As regards the population, Lithuania is 3 million people, but they are strong people, strong character. They were able to build themselves a place in history and geography. With, of course, the union of the Polish and the Lithuanian states has affected both countries. How far this effect is apparent? I mean, there was the Grand Duchess of Lithuania for some time in the medieval period, and the Grand Duke was really a man of character, and the family was able to maintain the solidarity of the people. Yet the union, was it forced on Lithuania, or why?
I think it wasn't matter of the realities of that time. You could think about two states, as you mentioned, Grand Duchy of Lithuania, which was huge state at that time. You could think about another great big state, the Kingdom of Poland, which was also the big state at that time. And in the Middle Ages, when you are the big, you have a lot of lands, and sooner or later the other forces are getting stronger and trying to get piece of this
cake. Yes.
Of this cake. So we had to fight many wars to defend our lands, and probably our neighbors or less friendly people became stronger and stronger. So we have been in the need to shoulder each other to keep the state running. And of course, we should probably not neglect the fact that the nobility of both countries have been somehow interlinked through culture, through marriages, through common practices, maybe business, as we would say today. Yes. So it was at that time.
And religion, both of them were Catholics,
yes,
of course, up till now. Yes, most of the majorities, I mean. So, but definitely, I mean, this had to come to an end with the great success of building of the Russian Empire with Alexander and, of course, Katharina. So definitely, the Russian Empire was able to take and access to Lithuania from 1795 onwards, almost till 1915, with a small interruption with the Napoleonic Wars. So this period had seen the Grand Duchess of Lithuania disappearing and becoming part of the Russian Empire. I think this was a hard period on the Lithuanians, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. We've been in the as it called union of two states for more than 200 years, which ended up, as you mentioned, in 1795 when Lithuania was annexed by Tsar Russia and became just one of the provinces of Russia. And that was not the best years in the history.
Sir, you're very diplomatic
of our history,
yes.
And especially it was for 40 years after one of the revolts, one of two, I think, revolts, which was organized by both Lithuanian and Poles against Tsar Russia. Our language was forbidden. So we couldn't no longer use the Latin alphabet for our books or our newspapers. So that actually resulted into the very, very unique phenomena, which I never ever heard existed anywhere in the world. In Lithuanian we call them knygnešiai, which is the word which is very difficult to translate the meaning. Knygnešys, that means the person who is carrying the books. That was actually smugglers, which have been smuggling into the country the books printed in Latin.
Wow.
The books have been printed outside and then smuggled in back to Lithuania already, and it was illegal, of course. And there is a famous sculpture in Lithuania when on the countryside the lady, the mother, is weaving some threads with a special, weaving machine, and the child sitting next to her, and she is teaching the child from this smuggled book. So it was
it's exactly like the fictitious movie of 451 Fahrenheit, right? The idea that they were burning in the future. It's a science fiction movie, and a science fiction novel that speaks about sometime books will be banned. So there was a group of people who were renegades and said, no, we are going to memorize the books and keep the culture. Because 451 Fahrenheit is the degree where the books are completely burned and all the papers are demolished. So at that time, when you are burning the books, so there will be no books no more. So they decided that the people are going to study these books by heart. So I never thought that this existed on the ground in history.
For 40 years.
For 40 years,
since 1864 until 1904.
So people were prevented from learning or talking to their language. Maybe they would kill the language, right?
To read, to print, to write in Latin.
Because the Lithuanian has its origin from Latin. It's very near.
Yes, Latin.
It's a Latin
alphabet, and it's an Indo-European language, which is close to Sanskrit, but it's based on Latin alphabet. Those all books have been published in Kirillitsa, so you could have only the books in Kirillitsa, and that was not very nice.
Oh. So we have to talk about the birth of the state. The state that in 1915 had the chance, and the golden chance, with the defeat of the Russian army in the World War I and the Bolshevik Revolution, and the Russians, or the Russian Empire, has been slightly disintegrated. Before just the communists became very much in power, they had a great struggle with the white forces, and the white forces, of course, were the imperial forces who were fighting the Reds, and this led the Soviet regime withdraw from the war in 1917 with the revolution, and become more introvert and more interested in protecting its borders. So this was a golden chance for the Lithuanians. And there was, of course, at that time, still the civil war went on until the early 20s. So there was the negotiations in Versailles in 1919. And Lithuania, of course, at that time was not defined as a state. Poland was defined as a state, and a victorious state from World War I. So the French said, why not make Poland a Grand Poland, something like a buffer state between the rest of European countries and the thick Russian man or power that will definitely gain power by time and by the economy and by the culture. The Soviets are going to come back. So we put a buffer state, a huge buffer state. But in came the Lithuanians against all odds and were able to fulfill the dream. How was that possible?
Now when we look from the perspective of more than 100 years, exactly
100 years.
101 years,
Yes. 1919 years. 1919 years.
It looks like a miracle.
Yes.
It looks like a miracle.
Everybody was against it. I mean, there was no real well-defined Lithuanian delegate. There were just delegate sympathizers, Lithuanians, American Lithuanians, and some French Lithuanians. But originally, there was nothing called a real delegate. Yes.
You cannot say that happens, just over the night, and it's suddenly. I think it's already from 1905. Certain elements of this understanding that what we lost over the 123 years of occupation since 1795. The understanding, the feeling is coming that we are a nation, that Lithuanians are the nation, it's a separate nation, that Lithuanian language is a language, it's a separate language, it's not like some dialect but it took almost 13 years since 1905 and 1918 when we declared our independence. And the time was very, very, very difficult. You have German forces on the territory of Lithuania, we have French forces, you have
White Russians
which have been defeated in gangs of armed people. And here, of course, we are grateful very much to these wise men, the patriots of the nation, who came with the idea, and they did what it takes this idea to be implemented, to have Lithuania as a state. It was not a new state; it was actually restoration of the state which we lost in the occupation in 1795, as we discussed. But these are the people who had the visionaries. But realities forced us to defend this idea with a gun in their hands. Could you imagine? No army, nothing.
And I mean, it all started with 6,000 volunteers, and at the peak of this armed guerrillas, if we may call them, or Lithuanian, the founded Lithuanian army, who lacked officers. It was only 30,000 able, strong men who had the face and who had the courage and who had the hearts and had few ammunition and arms. Yet they were able to fulfill a dream. And this, I think, is something that really is really admirable.
Exactly, I absolutely agree with you. And it's I know that some officers have been serving in the previous Tsar army, so they traveled to join the Lithuania to become officers in the Lithuanian army because they supported the idea. It was also the idea
they were aspiring,
which was close to in their hearts. And these officers came with the knowledge, of course, to help mobilize people, to train them, to create the army, which could even being very poorly equipped, very poorly armed, to defend attacks from, like as we say, from three different fronts at the same time. But yeah, we succeeded, and this is another probably miracle. As they say, it's a miracle to keep the country, the state.
I mean, having a capital, Vilnius, that has been long, very much, for many years, was not included even in the Lithuanian state, was a dream that was very far-fetched, and it was only with the deal that was signed with the Soviet Russia against the White Russians that they were able to fulfill this dream, and giving a concession that they will allow the Soviet army to go in if they want through their borders.
Let's call it annexation.
Yes, another annexation. Another so this is definitely. I mean, it's a lot of stakes to gamble to get a capital, and in the end, you were able to get a capital back. I mean, out of nowhere, because nobody was talking or accepting, even in Versailles, to consider Vilnius to be Lithuanian, right?
And during this, I was trying to remember, predecessor of United Nations, League of Nations. Yes, League of Nations. We really did. We put a lot of efforts to solve this question on that level, but it was unsuccessful, unfortunately.
Yes. So it had to be with signing with the Soviets. I mean, this is really something which was, I think, quite very much difficult to fulfill.
That's right. That's right. It was the step. It was very difficult to take, and then we lost our independence because of that again. because of this deal.
Yes. So now we are talking about a Lithuanian state that has been declared as an independent state from the 1919 onwards, and a state that was admitted to the League of Nations, and had another war or World War II was coming. After the break, we'll talk more, because this will be our last segment in history, because after that we have to talk about the Lithuania after 1990. So let's talk about the war for a very short segment, and then we go to Lithuania after 1990. Okay, sir?
Okay.
Yes, back again, word of info, and you can call us at 257-89407. With us today is Excellency Ambassador Arvydas Daunoravicius, Ambassador of Lithuania in Egypt, and Dr. Amr Mabrouk, Professor of Plastic Surgery at Ain Shams University. So back again, word of info.
So we're having His Excellency the Ambassador of Lithuania talking about a very critical period of history. This is 1940. And 1940, the Lithuanian state was under great hard times. World War II was declared. Poland has been occupied by the Germans. There was a treaty between Germany and the Soviet Union, the Nazi Germany and Soviet Union, that they would divide some lands and they would divide some parts. And the Lithuanian state was taken up by the Soviet army, and for a period of time.
It took a while for us to find out about this agreement between
Stalin and
Hitler.
Yes.
And it was the agreement signed by
Ribbentrop
and Molotov, the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Germany and Soviet Union, and it was additional protocols to that treaty signed, which actually divided the map of Europe into the not even interest zones, but as the part of as their property. It's an interesting story that at the beginning the line was drawn that way that Lithuania fell into the zone of German interest. And then they probably decided to change that, so they paid money and they redraw the map. It's very difficult, no one has seen the original maps, which is copies of that. But you see, the line with the signatures, then you see the line which is crossed, and the new line drawn, and again the signatures. So it's how two evil powers divided the world. It's mine, it's yours. Not asking opinion of these people who are in the map, in the middle.
Yes.
It's not a map. It's a real countries, real people, real tragedies and real losses that people experience.
So one day you woke up, you found the Soviet army occupying the country.
Something like that, yes. And of course it was in the 40s, then the Second World War started and the Nazis came. So they pushed Soviets, so Lithuania was occupied for a few years by Nazis, Nazi Germany, and then the Soviets came back and they pushed Nazis.
1944, then they pushed
them. And as we say, and they forgot to leave.
Mm-hmm.
They stayed for 50 years.
Yes.
So it was a third occupation by Russia or Soviet Union, if you count all of them, of Lithuania.
These were very much hard times, and I remember last time we brought the subject, which I believe will be the last part that we talk about this bad history, is that a lot of Lithuanian people, especially the intelligentsia, the culture, the highly cultured, the educated, the core of the Lithuanian people had the difficult choice. If once the Germans, the Nazi army was pushed away, there were two only solutions: either for these people to be arrested because they are a source of trouble for the Soviet Secret Service, they will be sent to Siberia, or they go into diaspora, wherever the time or the world will take them. Some of them were lucky enough to reach Canada and the United States of America. Some of them were caught in the middle. Some of them lost their lives, lost their independence. But almost all of them didn't carry enough papers to prove that they are white collars, right?
Yes, that's right. And of course, when the big part of them escaped through the displaced person camps in Germany after the war was finished. And they moved towards the American and UK zones in the Germany. So they, after a number of years in these displaced camps, they had the chance, let's say, to move to Canada, to move to United States. under certain conditions. And really, we are grateful to these countries, which at such a difficult time just opened the doors and accepted these people, because they had very, very little choice at that time. And of course, when you are the professor, when you are the doctor, when you come to United States, you should prove yourself. But first, you should sustain yourself. You should. These people came sometimes with their families, so they need to support children, and it was like very, how to say, there's a number of stories that people with a, with many degrees and with the experience working in a very high position had to be janitors or just to pay to work very low paid jobs and blue collar jobs just to keep the family,
to pay the rent,
to pay the bills. But they always had this temptation to reach better, something better. So surprisingly, it's a high number of, if not them, but their children or grandchildren have been finally graduating from universities and just climbing the ladder in the society. So now we have a number of even well-known Lithuanians in medicine, in art, in engineering, which managed to even starting from the very low-paid jobs, blue-collar jobs, to climb the ladder to
socioeconomic status.
Exactly, because they have been, I may say, stubborn, very motivated, because they thought maybe that is a way they could not only survive, but their voice would be heard
in upper places.
And they could raise the question of Lithuania, that Lithuania is occupied, and it should not continue forever.
We look at that period with great pride, of course, and you were a witness because you served from 2003 till 2008 almost.
That's correct.
As the General Counsel of Lithuania in Chicago, which is one of the biggest cities in the United States of America that has the highest population of Lithuanians who lived there. And you were almost calculating that there are almost about 800,000 people, a strong community that has Lithuanian ancestors and third or fourth generation Lithuanians, and yet most of them speak very fluent Lithuanian with an accent, but they are Lithuanian native speaker, which is something that is very important. How was that possible?
I think we should be grateful to these people from the society, professors, teachers, doctors, even civil servants, which had this very strong patriotism towards the country, towards the people of the country, towards the language, towards the history, and coming to, let's say, to United States or Canada after working long hours at, the factory or as a janitor. Then, after their work, they gathered as a community in some community centers. By the way, it was either created with those diaspora members who came much earlier.
Yes.
So they just joined this community centers, or they created themselves. And for them, it was a place they could feel that they are among family. Mm-hmm. That the doctor is a doctor, that professor is a professor, that officer is officer, civil servant is a civil servant. So they actually increased this network and NGO work, and I'm very happy that it was a very smart decision that they understand that it's very important to pay attention to their children or grandchildren, to younger generation. So why this is a reason why a lot of efforts have been, and a lot of money, of course, have been invested into this, as we called Lithuanistic education. So they created schools. They had people who could work as a teacher. So once a week, it's a Saturday, they had like half a day. They brought the children from around the community into the community centers, to any center they built, they rent, they bought, to teach these children about their country. Some of them haven't seen the country never before. Mm-hmm. So this is really, I don't know who, but these people have been very smart to go this way, understanding that education, the cultural education, humanistic education is very, very important to keep the spirit of independence, spirit of independent country, spirit of being part of the community, which are part of the people in Lithuania, which was occupied at that time.
Mm-hmm. So this brings us definitely to 1990. It's a crucial date where the 3 Baltic states were able to get an independence. The first 3 states out of the Soviet Union which were able to build up a state of their own, an independent state. And from 1990 onwards, we are trying to talk about a miracle, a country that has been occupied for almost big part of the 20th century, and for the last 10 years of the 20th century has a chance to build a state. So after the break, we have to talk about Lithuania of today. Okay.
Yes, back again, World of Info, with His Excellency Ambassador Arvydas Daunoravicius, Ambassador of Lithuania in Egypt, and Dr. Amr Mabrouk, Professor of Plastic Surgery at Ain Shams University. Okay, so back again, World of Info.
So we're talking about a crucial period of history, a period that is very emotional, as His Excellency was telling us, Ambassador of Lithuania, about this period, because he personally was involved in it. It's part of his life. He has seen the occupation, and he has attended, as the rest of the 3 million population of Lithuania and the supporters of Lithuania from all the descendants all over the world, the Singing Revolution. Right?
Yes.
Tell us about these days. I know it brought tears to our eyes and to your eyes, sir, with all due respect, because you are remembering the period that the Lithuanians thought that they can make it. And it's only this belief and the faith that they are invincible that they were able to conquer fear.
It was a period when the Soviet Union started feeling that if something is not going to change, then the country will collapse one or another way. So they went to the direction they call it perestroika. And in the framework of that perestroika, also some understanding, and it was a little bit easy grip of special services, understanding that something should be changed and what was lost should be regained. So we in Lithuania also, it was like a non-governmental organization created, which we called at the beginning, it was called for even it's impossible to translate into English language, the Movement for Perestroika. Later on, very quickly, it was changed to Movement for Independence. But it started, yes, about several years before the real independence was declared, re-establishment of independence. But we should not forget those people who, during the entire Soviet occupation after the Second World War until 19, never ever accepted the fact that they are occupied and they are part of the Soviet Union. So it was always a resistance movement in Lithuania, always, since the very, very first day.
There were some partisans involved,
yes,
in the 40s, up to the 40s, the end of the 40s, right?
Actually, it's up to 50. Just trying to remember which year that was when we say our last leader of our independent fighters have been caught. I think it was about 10 years since the war was ended.
1955, yes.
1955, 1956 or 54, I don't recall exact date. And we are happy that we finally found the remains of this leader, the great man. And he was buried reburied as a head of state.
Oh.
As a head of state, and that coincided to 100th years since he was born. So he was tortured, severely tortured and killed by the Soviets. So it was always independent resistance, military until a certain period, and then, as we say, silent resistance, publishing information, spreading among the people, letting the rest of the world know what's going on in Lithuania. And the church played a great role in that. For decades, it was the Chronicles of Lithuanian Church published with the facts how the human rights, the rights of Lithuanian people have been violated during the Soviet occupation. So it was not from nowhere. So the spirit of regaining independence was alive. Maybe with the years, the number of people who believed in that was shrinking, because 50 years of occupation is quite a long period. And then this movement was created, Sąjūdis, an independent movement, who participated into the elections. It had candidates. The candidates have been elected, and they raised that question in the parliament. At that time, it was called Supreme Council. That we should use all legal means. And by the way, at that time, the constitution of the Soviet Union, occupying power, in paper was very, very good. It allowed you quit the Soviet Union. So we say, okay, we're using that constitution, that possibility to quit, and then it started.
And nobody could stop it, right?
No, and then it started, and then of course we had a military attempt to attack on our parliament. The TV tower was attacked. A lot of people have been dead. Tanks have been sent to the streets, and a lot of people died. A lot of people have been, even more people have been wounded. But miracle happened again. I think the parliament was not attacked because it was so many people around the parliament. These people gathered
to form a human shield, right?
Shield, and it was decided that it will be the
blood massacre,
massacre, and the blood bath will be too deep. So miracle happened, and Parliament was not attacked. So it's how we kept our independence. And of course, the internal things which have been happening in former Soviet Union and then the Russian Federation, and when Soviet Union disintegrated into
the putsch after the army putsch,
exactly.
And Yeltsin being installed in power.
Yes, and but before that we suffered the economical blockade, because you should understand that Lithuania is fully integrated into the economical system of the Soviet Union. We had no external relations with the rest of the world, so that means that all economy was, well, I cannot say 100%, but at least the 96-98% was linked to the rest of the Soviet Union. So when you cut these ties, so you cut everything. You cut supplies. Of course, we had certain production which was made in Lithuania and sent into entire Soviet Union, but we also have been cut off from supplies like oil, gas. Gas we had, because a pipe which goes through Lithuania to Kaliningrad district of the Russian Federation, the pipe goes through Lithuania. So it was, if they would cut this gas, so they would cut Kaliningrad would be cut off as well. But we had no oil, for example. The streets have been the air in the city was so clean because it was no cars, no benzene, no fuel, so almost no heating at home, no hot water at home. So I remember washing because we need to shave, to wash yourself. So we had gas. So every morning you had to heat, to boil the water, just to do, in the winter, to wash yourself in the morning, to shave, to brush your teeth, and this thing. So it was. Now it sounds like I don't know, like a disaster. But then, the spirit was so high, so strong, that we took that as adventure.
How could the economy sustain and start the inertia of working and getting more independent? I think this is a very difficult situation.
It was very, very difficult situation, because at the beginning we had enormous inflation. But I think it was some really smart decisions have been made. And of course, probably another good thing, that immediately the different organizations and even the governments, after they officially recognized the Republic of Lithuania, they helped us a lot, not only financially or these more in kind of grants, but also through the experts and advisors. So I think it was a very, very good decision that we have been listening what our friends are talking to us. Of course, filtering their advice, just not everything could be implemented 100%, but majority of, because the advice they gave, it was sincere, looking into the future of Lithuania. By the way, a lot of members of Lithuanian diaspora from United States and Canada came to Lithuania to work as advisors, and I personally know one person who was involved in actually re-establishing our national currency at that time. So he came to Bank of Lithuania, National Bank of Lithuania, and he worked as advisor, just to prepare introduction of national currency. Because understanding was that you should separate financial system. So that means you should cut the circulation of the Soviet ruble. So it was cut off, but with a terrible economical situation, you cannot immediately introduce your national currency because the inflation was so high, so the currency would devaluate on the spot. So it was a transitional period, several years, when we had like vouchers, coupons, where the Soviet ruble was not accepted means of payment, but we still had no national currency. It was just like traditional coupons, or you call whatever you want. And only in 1993 we already introduced our national currency, which stayed for 22 years. And then we joined the zone of euro, and now our national currency is euro.
That's very
since 2015.
So this is a period. How were you able to build an economy? Now, what are the pillars of the economy in Lithuania? Industry or fine industry, or what? Or commerce?
We had probably both. We had a port, so which generates certain revenues, but of course you need to have cargoes. I mentioned at the beginning that last year the turnover was I think more than 42 million tons of cargoes, which is quite good. And I still remember when we have been so happy when we reached 20 million tons of cargoes a year at that port. So it had been generating certain revenues. We had and we still have the oil refinery, which was also contributing through the revenues and into the state budget. But the most difficult part, it was to change the financial system and to change the taxation system and to reach the status when the people actually are paying taxes.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you have chaos, no one is paying taxes,
yes,
because there is no even instruments how to collect these taxes. So it's step by step. We had several really very hard years, as I mentioned, with the enormous inflation rate, with the enormous shortage of simple products. But step by step, which was also very important, it's a private initiative. Really, where the people, Lithuanian people, are very business-like orientated. If you give them freedom, they could create miracles. They could build whatever you think about. So it's step by step, and of course you had to have quite wise the policy of the government to keep this, to promote this. We understood that traditional spheres of industry are, of course, very important culturally, like agriculture, food, beverages, other traditional sectors are important culturally. But we should not build the future of the country on the sectors which have been important like a century ago. So the idea that we should build on the know-how base, because we had a lot of scientific research institutes with a really exceptional know-how in these institutions, to build on the new sectors, biotechnology, on chemistry, on now IT, ICT. These sectors came later. At that time, we haven't talked about it, but it was understanding that we should catch up with the modern new sectors, because it's a future of our economy, it's a future of the world. So we doing quite well. I just give you one example. The 10% of the world scientific lasers in the world, entire world, 10% is made in Lithuania.
Wow.
But it's scientific lasers, it's not industrial lasers. And of course, industrial lasers, it's another very important niche, so which we're now trying to include into our development plans. So we should step by step. But the most we should be grateful to the people who have been so patient, our people, so patient to go through all these difficulties until we reach the point we are now.
So a country with people like this will definitely reach whatever they aim for and whatever they hope for. And definitely the sky is the limit, right?
Exactly.
Sir, we were very proud to have you today talking one-on-one about Lithuania, about the struggle for Lithuanian independence and for the struggle of the Lithuanian economy in the post-independence day. And you have to promise us to come again to talk about Lithuania, and especially Lithuanian-Egyptian relations, which I think is thriving and getting more after the two bilateral visits between the Foreign Secretary of State from Egypt and from Lithuania, when they paid visits, both of them, to the other country. And I believe things are going to get much better.
I have no doubts, and allow me to say that I'm very grateful for your invitation. I'm very grateful to the listeners who have spent 1 hour listening to our conversation, and I accept your invitation to come again
very soon,
inshallah, with a great pleasure. And thank you very much to you and to all who listen to this program. Thank you.
Thank you. And by this we come to the end of Word of Info with His Excellency Ambassador Arvydas Daunoravicius, Ambassador of Lithuania in Egypt, Dr. Amr Mabrouk, Professor of Plastic Surgery at Ain Shams University. Dua Muhammad was at the controls. I'm Najla Nagib. See you next Thursday, same time, same station, FM 95.4.